you seen any bribery? Have you seen any evidence of corruption?
Never. I never had this experience. Personal to me, never ever come everybody, somebody and to offer me something for whatever, give me your vote for.
The tragic life of Franz Beckenbauer is a story split between two worlds, courtroom on one side, his funeral on the other. This is not the fairy tale ending anyone expected for Der Kaiser, the emperor who seemed untouchable. When Beckenbauer died on January 7th, 2024, Germany had to grapple with something far more complicated than grief. They mourned a legend whose final chapter was written in scandal, silence and sickness. Der Kaiser, the Lichtgestalt, a figure of shining light who seemed incapable of failure. That was who the world thought he was during his brightest years. But the story of his last decade tells a very different tale, and it is one you need to hear. Before we dive into the tragedy that unfolded, I want you to hit the hype button and give this video some love. Your engagement means everything, and it helps us keep telling stories like this one. Now, let's begin with the beginning of the end. A story that shakes the foundations of what we thought we knew about a legend. Franz Beckenbauer was, without question, one of the greatest footballers and managers the world has ever seen. He won the World Cup as a player in 1974 and again as a manager in 1990. He was the face of the 2006 World Cup in Germany, an event that was supposed to rebrand the entire nation. It was called the Summer Fairy Tale. Beckenbauer was the architect of that dream, the man who convinced the world that Germany deserved to host football's greatest tournament. For nearly a decade, people credited him with giving Germany its happiest summer. He was more than a sportsman. He was a symbol. He was rehabilitation. He was elegance. He was proof that Germany could be brilliant again. But in October 2015, everything changed. Journalists at Der Spiegel published an investigation that sent shockwaves through football and through Germany itself. They alleged that the 2006 World Cup was not won through Beckenbauer's legendary charisma or diplomatic skill. It was bought. According to their report, a hidden fund of approximately 6.7 million euros had been established. This money was allegedly used to secure the votes of 4 Asian members of the FIFA Executive Committee. The vote happened in July 2000. Germany won the bid against South Africa by just one vote, 12-11. The Spiegel report suggested that without the slush fund, Beckenbauer would have lost. This struck at the heart of everything people believed about him: his integrity, his ability to win through talent and charm, his honesty. The allegations suggested something far darker, that he was willing to break rules, to hide money, to compromise his principles for victory. The revelation was catastrophic because it meant the summer fairy tale itself was built on corruption. The money came from Robert Louis Dreyfus, the CEO of Adidas. In 2000, he loaned 6.7 million euros to the German bidding committee. When Louis Dreyfus demanded repayment in 2004 and 2005, the German organising committee faced a problem. They transferred 6.7 million euros to a FIFA account in Geneva, claiming it was for a cultural gala at the Berlin Olympic Stadium. The gala never happened. The money was paid anyway and transferred to a Zurich account controlled by Louis Dreyfus. The money had made a complete circle, using FIFA as a pass-through entity to hide the truth. The money trail did not end with Louis Dreyfus. Investigators found that funds were channeled through a Swiss law firm to a Qatari company called Chemco, owned by Mohammed bin Hammam. Bin Hammam, a former FIFA power broker, later banned for life for corruption, controlled the Asian bloc of votes. Documents surfaced showing Beckenbauer had signed contractual agreements with Jack Warner, another disgraced FIFA official. These signatures dismantled his defense of ignorance. Beckenbauer admitted to making a mistake to secure a FIFA grant. He insisted he did not buy votes, saying, "We did not buy votes." He claimed the payment was simply to release a FIFA subsidy. This explanation made no sense. Why would you need to pay FIFA to receive a grant from FIFA? The logic did not hold. The public was not convinced. In 2015, Swiss federal prosecutors opened criminal proceedings against Beckenbauer and 3 other high-ranking officials. They were suspected of fraud, criminal mismanagement, money laundering, and misappropriation. His home in Salzburg was raided. His bank accounts were scrutinized. For the man who had lived in the spotlight for 40 years, suddenly everything was shadows and suspicion. The investigation cast a long shadow over the final years of his life. He could not escape it. He could not answer it away. But then came another blow, and it was not from prosecutors. It was far more personal. Stefan Beckenbauer was Franz's son. He was born in 1968. He had followed his father's footsteps into football, playing professionally for FC Saarbrücken and 1860 Munich. Later, he became a youth coach at Bayern Munich, where he mentored young emerging players, including Bastian Schweinsteiger and Thomas Müller. Stefan was diagnosed with glioblastoma, a brain tumour that is particularly aggressive and cruel. His battle with the disease was long and devastating. As the illness progressed, he could barely speak. He was barely conscious. On July 31, 2015, Stefan Beckenbauer died. He was 46 years old. Friends described Franz as shattered, completely shattered. The man who had always appeared invincible suddenly had nothing left. In interviews years earlier, Beckenbauer had expressed regret that he had focused too much on his career and not enough on his family during Stefan's childhood. The illness had brought them closer together. That made the loss infinitely worse. Uli Hoeneß, who had been Franz's friend and colleague at Bayern Munich for decades, later spoke about what happened. The death of his son Stefan and the rumours about the 2006 World Cup affected him. Since then, his health has also deteriorated, the peace which you sadly couldn't enjoy in recent years. The timing was cruel beyond measure. Stefan died in July. The scandal broke in October. Beckenbauer was forced to defend his life's work while grieving his child. He was being investigated while his heart was broken. Most people would have broken completely, and in many ways, he did. But before the legal troubles could destroy him further, he faced another reckoning. This one was about his moral character. In June 2014, the FIFA Ethics Committee imposed a ban on Beckenbauer. He was banned from all football-related activities for 90 days because he refused to cooperate with Michael Garcia, an American attorney investigating corruption. Beckenbauer claimed he could not understand questions sent in English and asked for them in German. This excuse was widely seen as nonsense. He had lived in New York, played for the Cosmos, and spoke fluent English. The excuse was viewed as arrogant. The ban was lifted 2 weeks later, but the damage was done. He was branded as uncooperative, part of the old FIFA guard refusing to change. Then came the comment that would haunt his legacy forever. In 2014, FIFA awarded the 2022 World Cup to Qatar. The decision sparked global outrage because of how Qatar treated migrant workers. International organisations described the conditions as modern slavery. Passport confiscation, squalid living conditions, high death rates among construction workers. The conditions were awful. They were inexcusable. Beckenbauer had visited Qatar as a FIFA executive. He travelled in VIP limousines. He met with sheikhs and organisers. He never saw what was actually happening, or perhaps he chose not to look. When asked about the treatment of workers in Qatar, he told the German press, "I have not seen a single slave in Qatar. They all walk around freely, neither in chains nor in hoods." This comment exploded in condemnation. It was factually ignorant of what modern bonded labour actually looks like. It was deeply callous. Critics argued that Beckenbauer had simply chosen to turn a blind eye to human suffering because it was inconvenient to his business relationships. The backlash was severe. It showed that Der Kaiser was perhaps morally hollow, that he prioritised money and status over human rights. It showed that he was an apologist for a regime accused of horrific abuses. But there was more to the financial story. This was not the first time Beckenbauer had faced scrutiny about money. In the 1970s, during the absolute peak of his playing career, he was investigated for tax evasion. He was forced to pay approximately 1.8 million Deutsche Marks in back taxes. When he signed with the New York Cosmos in 1977, cynical observers suggested it was not just a sporting challenge, it was a financial escape. He was fleeing the stigma of a tax investigation at home. This pattern continued into his later years. For decades, Beckenbauer maintained his primary residence in Austria, just across the border from Germany. Later, he moved to Switzerland before returning to Austria in Salzburg. In the early 2000s, as Germany faced economic challenges, the residency of sports stars in low-tax jurisdictions became a political issue. Hans Eichel, the German finance minister, publicly criticized figures like Beckenbauer, Schumacher, and Boris Becker for moving abroad to escape high tax rates while still enjoying German adulation. Beckenbauer's defense was dismissive, but the narrative lingered. He was happy to be the face of Germany for glory and applause, but less willing to contribute to its social safety net. When the scandal broke in 2006, this pre-existing narrative made the allegations of slush funds and money laundering easier for people to believe. Then came the physical decline. After 2015, Beckenbauer was hit by a cascade of ailments that seemed relentless. In 2016, he underwent open-heart surgery. In 2017, he had another one. These were serious operations requiring long rehabilitation periods. He cancelled all public engagements. In 2018, he had a hip replacement. The man who had revolutionised football with his fluid movement was struggling to walk. In 2019, he suffered an eye stroke, an ocular infarction. It left him completely blind in his right eye. He told a magazine, "I have a so-called eye infarction in one eye. Unfortunately, I can't see anything in the right eye. I can cope with that, and I have to be careful with the heart." The loss of vision affected his balance and his sense of space. It limited his independence further. He withdrew even more from the world, but the worst was coming. Reports emerged that he was suffering from Parkinson's disease and dementia. This condition robbed him of his memory, his wit, his mind itself. His defense team presented medical certificates stating he was no longer fit for interrogation or trial. Doctors argued that questioning could be life-threatening because of his heart condition. His memory issues made his testimony unreliable. By early 2023, he was largely bedridden. He had difficulty speaking. He was a shadow of the man he had once been. In April 2021, the Swiss Federal Criminal Court halted the proceedings against him. The statute of limitations had expired. The alleged crimes occurred in 2005. Under Swiss law, the limitation period was 15 years. The trial had been delayed repeatedly by the COVID-19 pandemic and by his deteriorating health. While he avoided conviction, he was denied exoneration. The cloud of corruption was never lifted. The world never got a clean ending, neither did he. The final 8 years of his life were defined by silence. Beckenbauer retreated to his villa in Salzburg. He ceased his column for Bild newspaper. He stopped attending Bayern Munich matches. He refused interviews. This isolation was partly strategic, advised by lawyers to avoid incriminating himself. It was partly necessary because of his failing health and his grief. The man who had always had a quote for every situation had nothing left to say. He missed the funeral of his friend Pelé. He missed the World Cup in Qatar in 2022. He cited his health, and it was true. His health was failing rapidly and his mind was deteriorating. His final public words came in December 2023, just a month before his death. He wrote a foreword for a book about the 1990 World Cup win. He looked back not at scandal, but at camaraderie. He wrote about how you can only be successful if you have fun playing football. He spoke about friendship. These simple words stood in heartbreaking contrast to the lonely, litigious, painful reality of his final days. They were words from a different lifetime, from a different man. On January 7th, 2024, Franz Beckenbauer died peacefully in his sleep in Salzburg, surrounded by family. The immediate reaction was national mourning, but it was mourning complicated by unresolved shadows. He was buried in a private ceremony at the Perleker Forest Cemetery in Munich, laid to rest next to his son Stefan. The public needed closure, though, so a grand memorial service was held at the Allianz Arena on January 19th. Tens of thousands attended, including the German Chancellor and President. The speeches at this memorial were notable for their aggressive defense of Beckenbauer against what they called a relentless media witch hunt. Uli Hoeneß delivered an emotional eulogy that moved many to tears. He said, "He completed his masterpiece when he brought the World Cup to Germany. The Allianz Arena would never have been built if Franz hadn't brought the World Cup to Germany. I miss you very much. Rest in peace. Peace, which you sadly couldn't enjoy in recent years." The tragedy of Franz Beckenbauer lies in the stark dichotomy of his life. For 60 years, he was the emperor, a man of grace, success, and light. His final decade was defined by darkness, the darkness of corruption allegations, the darkness of grief for a dead son, the darkness of blindness in one eye, the darkness of dementia robbing his mind. He lived long enough to see his monument, the summer fairy tale tarnished by the very methods used to build it. He died without clearing his name, shielded by a statute of limitations rather than a verdict of innocence. Yet, as tributes flowed in 2024, it became clear that for many people, the brilliance of the player and the coach still outshone the failures of the administrator. The tragedy remains that Beckenbauer himself, in his final years of silence and sickness, was unable to feel that forgiveness. He died a man besieged, a sad ending to a life that was, for so long, a fairy tale. But the light he created on the pitch, the joy he brought to millions, the beauty he showed that football was capable of achieving, that did not die with him. That lives on. That is the legacy that matters. If you want to learn more about Franz Beckenbauer and the fall of one of football's greatest figures, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts on his legacy. What do you think about him? Let us know down below.
You had a great time.
I don't think there was anyone that went on Question Sport that didn't love Emlyn.
You are impossible. Wasn't it Emlyn who got...
Emlyn Walter Hughes was a force of nature, a man whose boundless enthusiasm earned him the nickname Crazy Horse and made him one of the most recognisable figures in British football. Born in 1947, Hughes captained both Liverpool and England, amassing 62 international caps and steering Liverpool through their most dominant era under Bill Shankly and Bob Paisley. He won 2 European Cups, 5 league championships, and virtually every honour available in club football. His relentless, charging presence on the field became the embodiment of Liverpool's success during the 1970s, and his infectious energy seemed limitless. Yet, behind this image of tireless vigour lay a far more complex story, one marked by silent battles, crushing disappointments, and ultimately, a devastating physical decline that would contradict everything the Crazy Horse persona represented. The public knew Hughes as a man of boundless enthusiasm, someone who gave 100% commitment in every match. After retiring from football, he transitioned seamlessly into media work, becoming a beloved team captain on the BBC quiz show, A Question of Sport. This role cultivated a national persona characterised by jovial certainty and quick-wittedness, making him a household name far beyond the football terraces. Friends and colleagues described him as a complete one-off, an absolute hero whose distinctive voice and laugh endeared him to an entire generation. He received an Officer of the Order of the British Empire in 1980 for his services to sport, cementing his status as a national treasure. His wife Barbara later confirmed that he was exactly as people saw him on television, a nice, ordinary, well-mannered guy who maintained an unwavering optimism throughout his life. But beneath this public image of relentless positivity, Hughes fought private wars that few supporters ever knew about. When he joined Liverpool from Blackpool in 1967, he entered a dressing room with its own rigid hierarchy and established power structures. The most significant of these hidden battles began in 1973, when Hughes ascended to the captaincy, taking over from Tommy Smith, the formidable defender known as the Iron Man. This transition occurred after Smith had reportedly fallen out with manager Bill Shankly. But for Smith, a long-serving bedrock of the club, the change felt like a hostile takeover rather than a natural evolution. Smith's subsequent reflections revealed the profound sense of betrayal he felt, lamenting that Hughes was spoiling his club. Everything in Smith's life was football, especially Liverpool, and he couldn't understand why he should let this two-faced little so-and-so spoil his football life. Having been at the club far longer than Hughes, the animosity between these two legends ran deep and poisonous. Smith absolutely hated Hughes, and it was known within the boot room that the two men never spoke to each other. This wasn't merely professional rivalry or tactical disagreement. Hughes was noted as a player who always liked to be king of the roost and wanted to be a charge hand, suggesting the clash was fundamentally about who controlled the dressing room environment and held symbolic power within the club hierarchy. The depth of this personal dislike was occasionally betrayed by bitter commentary. After Ron Harris committed a foul on Hughes during a game game at Anfield, Smith reportedly quipped to the opponent that he could get to like him, illustrating the chilling severity of the animosity he harboured. What made this feud remarkable, however, was the extraordinary professionalism both men demonstrated. The psychological tension was successfully contained, becoming a battle managed entirely behind closed doors. Club staff made it clear they didn't care if players got on like a house on fire or couldn't stand the sight of each other, as long as they didn't let their personal feelings spill over onto the pitch. In fairness to both legends, they rigorously adhered to this code. The vast majority of fans watching them play alongside each other remained completely unaware of the feud. The containment of such intense hatred within the context of repeated high-stakes European and domestic campaigns reflected the hyper-professional discipline enforced by the Shankly and Paisley regimes. This elevation of the collective cause above individual ego required a sophisticated management of psychological tension, allowing them to remain consummate professionals despite their internal warfare. Paradoxically, Hughes demonstrated a nuanced professionalism himself. While he was perceived as self-serving in his pursuit of leadership, he didn't allow his personal feelings to overshadow his respect for Smith's abilities. In his own autobiography, Hughes offered a profound tribute to his nemesis, writing that Smith was the greatest captain he had ever played under. Although he never particularly got along with him as a man, Hughes had nothing but admiration and respect for Smith as a captain on the pitch, acknowledging his powerful qualities of leadership. Contemporary observers regarded this statement as the biggest compliment that Tommy Smith would ever hear from the most unexpected source. It revealed a man capable of separating personal animosity from professional recognition, maintaining his integrity even while navigating one of football's most toxic internal relationships. Making 665 appearances for Liverpool, Hughes's boundless enthusiasm and commitment solidified his standing among the Anfield faithful. He captained the team through an era of unprecedented success, lifting trophies and leading by example with his charging runs and tireless work rate. Yet despite this stellar domestic career and his 62 caps across an 11-year international tenure, Hughes's professional narrative contains a permanent, unfulfilled void that haunted him throughout his life. He never featured in a major World Cup finals tournament, an omission consistently recognised as a significant struggle that endured long after his retirement. The closest Hughes came to achieving this pinnacle was during the 1970 World Cup in Mexico, where England, as holders, were managed by Sir Alf Ramsey. Hughes was selected for the squad as the sole Liverpool representative and the youngest player overall, a remarkable achievement that should have marked the beginning of his World Cup story. However, his role was strictly that of a reserve. He was ultimately one of only 2 outfield players in the entire squad, the other being Nobby Stiles, who did not feature in any game as England progressed to the quarter-finals. This historical footnote emphasises the tragedy of timing and managerial preference that shaped his international career. Ramsey favoured the left-footed Terry Cooper and Bob McNabb for the left-back and half roles. Despite Hughes's versatility and forceful, exuberant style, the pivotal moment that sealed Hughes's absence forever occurred during the quarter-final match against West Germany, which England lost after extra time. During this crucial encounter, Ramsey's tactical decisions came under intense scrutiny. He controversially substituted key figures like Bobby Charlton and Martin Peters in the second half, yet crucially, Ramsey elected to retain Terry Cooper at left-back for the entire 120 minutes. Even though Cooper was visibly and clearly exhausted, Hughes, available and fresh on the bench to replace Cooper, was left unused. This managerial reluctance to utilise top-tier talent in the decisive moment of the tournament solidified Hughes's permanent failure to achieve World Cup status. The analysis suggests his omission in 1970 was less a matter of lacking ability and more a confluence of specific managerial preference and a critical tactical miscalculation in the match that defined England's tournament. Had Ramsey made the logical substitution, Hughes's international record would have been fundamentally altered. The absence of World Cup experience contrasted starkly with Hughes's profound emotional investment in competition. His intense reaction to losing the 1971 FA Cup final to Arsenal, where he was visibly distraught collecting his runner-up medal, prompted commentator Kenneth Wolstenholme to remark that Hughes was really absolutely sick. This level of commitment underscored the deep pain the World Cup omission must have caused, confirming that for a player of his era, this missing international validation constituted the greatest professional void, even when compared against the extraordinary success achieved with Liverpool. Despite winning 2 European Cups and 5 league championships, playing in a World Cup remained an essential benchmark in how a player's career was judged, often overshadowing even multiple European triumphs. The success of Hughes's televised career, stemming from the authenticity of his enthusiastic character, subsequently amplified the profound tragedy of what came next. In August 2003, Hughes collapsed at home, suffering from severe head pains, notably just 1 day after participating in a charity football match. The speed and brutality of the disease's onset were particularly shocking, as it struck a man whose professional career had been defined by remarkable durability. Biographical records confirm he had never missed a day's training during his illustrious career, making the sudden collapse all the more devastating. The resulting diagnosis was a brain tumour, which Hughes himself described as being very nasty. He underwent an initial operation, but the surgical procedure could not completely remove the malignant growth. The tumour became cancerous, necessitating a period of difficult chemotherapy. What followed was a 15-month battle against an illness that brutally undermined the physical vigour he had spent his entire life cultivating. The chemotherapy took a severe toll on his body, and in his final months, the illness ravaged his physical capabilities, reducing the mobility of the man famously nicknamed Crazy Horse for his charging runs. He was left virtually unable to walk, and his eyesight was severely affected. This biographical detail underscores a poignant irony. The illness directly attacked the physical vitality and competitive spirit that had defined his entire public life. The disease showed no mercy to a man who had dedicated every fibre of his being to movement and athleticism, who had built his reputation on never stopping, never slowing down, never giving less than everything he had. Despite the physical devastation, Hughes maintained the positive philosophy that had characterised his entire existence. His wife Barbara, who was married to him for 32 years, recalled that even as his health failed, he became even kinder and more thoughtful. In his final, poignant moments, as she helped him into bed or onto the sofa, Hughes would look intently into her eyes and affirm that they had had a lovely life, hadn't they? This statement stands as a powerful testament to his unwavering character, a refusal to allow the pain and terminal nature of his illness to diminish his appreciation for his life's success and joy. It revealed a man who, even in the face of death, could look back without bitterness at what he had achieved and the relationships he had built. Hughes never complained about the unfairness of his diagnosis, never railed against the cruelty of fate that had given him such vitality only to strip it away so suddenly and completely. Instead, he focused on gratitude, on the love he had shared, on the victories he had celebrated, on the laughter that had defined so many of his days. Barbara spoke of how he would still smile even when the pain was at its worst, how he would tell jokes to lighten the mood when visitors came to see him, how he refused to let the tumour define his final chapter, choosing instead to remind everyone around him of the beautiful journey they had all shared together. Hughes died on November 9, 2004, at the age of 57, at his home in Sheffield, surrounded by his wife Barbara and their children, Emma and Emlyn Jr. The death of this beloved figure led to a significant national outpouring of grief, reflecting his unique position as both an illustrious sporting hero and a universally beloved media personality. The scale of the mourning was evident at his funeral service held at Sheffield Cathedral, which was packed to its 1,700 capacity, with hundreds of mourners standing outside in the rain to pay their respects. The attendance list read like a history of modern English football, encompassing Liverpool greats across multiple eras, including Kevin Keegan, Kenny Dalglish, Phil Neal, Alan Kennedy, and current Newcastle manager Graeme Souness. Dignitaries also included the club chairman David Moores, chief executive Rick Parry, and former chief executive Peter Robinson, who was in charge when Hughes was acquired from Blackpool. The diversity of attendance, incorporating players, administrators, and fans, demonstrated that Hughes's influence transcended typical boundaries of team and era. He was a constant, unifying institutional figure from the Shankly acquisition through to the modern administration. During the service, former teammate John Toshack delivered a tribute, stating that Hughes epitomised what the club was all about in those heady days with Bill Shankly, and then, later on, Bob Paisley, emphasising his leadership by example and contagious enthusiasm. The service concluded fittingly with the Cathedral Choir singing the emotional Liverpool Kop anthem, You'll Never Walk Alone, a song that had accompanied Hughes throughout his career at Anfield and now accompanied him one final time. The lasting impact of Hughes's struggle extended beyond his personal biography. His grieving family, including Barbara and daughter Emma, later spoke openly about their devotion to this irreplaceable man. They engaged with the charity brain tumour research, utilising Hughes's iconic status to raise awareness of the disease that took his life. This decision transformed his death into a meaningful platform for advocacy, providing a final altruistic component to his complex legacy. In assessing the life of Emlyn Hughes, it becomes clear that his triumphs are profoundly defined by the struggles he internalised and confronted. The man celebrated as the embodiment of unstoppable energy, Crazy Horse himself was simultaneously a complex figure who managed acute psychological conflict under intense pressure, enduring professional heartbreak that forever marked his international record, and finally facing a rapid, devastating physical collapse. His ability to compartmentalise the hatred for Tommy Smith, maintaining professional excellence despite intense personal revulsion, and his ultimate positive affirmation of a lovely life in the face of terminal decline, reveal a character whose depth and emotional honesty ultimately exceeded the boundless enthusiasm for which he was known. The powerful imagery of his life is generated precisely by this tension between the relentless spirit and the formidable, often unseen, battles he endured. Hughes never played in a World Cup, never reconciled with his most bitter rival, and never defeated the illness that took him far too young. Yet he lifted European Cups, captained one of the greatest club sides in history, became a beloved national figure, and faced death with the same optimistic grace that had defined his life. He was Crazy Horse to the end, charging forward even when there was nowhere left to run, affirming the beauty of his journey, even as it came to a close. His legacy remains not just in the trophies and the caps, but in the example of a man who fought his battles, public and private, with unwavering professionalism and, ultimately, with love.
Eventually, when I got going, because I struggled at the start at Sunderland, it was hard.
In song, in the sense of, you know, you were living hard, drinking and gambling was a big part of your life. You're a young man and you weren't.
The tragedy of Niall Quinn. At 59 years old, this Irish football legend faced a darkness that nearly consumed him. After hanging up his boots in 2004, Quinn described that year as a real bad year. It felt dark, he admitted. It was tough getting out of bed sometimes. He called retirement a death within your life. Imagine going from being a major star to Mr. Joe Public overnight. That brutal shift in identity left him in a void most footballers never talk about. But here is the real question. Is Niall Quinn still trapped in that depression today? Before we answer that, I want to ask you something. Have you ever experienced a massive change in your life that left you feeling lost? Maybe you lost a job, ended a relationship, or moved away from everything familiar. If Quinn's story resonates with you, drop your experience in the comments below. And if you want more honest looks at football legends beyond the glory, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. Now, back to Quinn at 59. The answer is no, he is not still depressed. But the reality is far more interesting than a simple recovery story. Because in 2024, his entire world revolves around the very trauma that nearly broke him. His wife, Gillian Quinn, presented her PhD research in March 2024 at a major sports conference. Her topic? How professional footballers can experience a smooth transition into retirement. Her research revealed that 75% of professional footballers divorce within 3 years of retiring. She traced this back to a massive identity crisis, mental health issues, and loss of sense of purpose. Gillian has been vocal about this before, openly admitting that when Niall retired, we went through our difficulties. Think about that. His tragedy has become an academic focus in his own home. And Niall himself? In 2020, 2024, he is the founder and president of Team Taka. This venture works with youth football clubs to create podcasts that educate, inspire, and empower the next generation. In a February 2024 podcast, Quinn talked about mindful communication and how it can greatly influence the mental health and overall well-being of young athletes. This is not just a job for him. He is turning his trauma into his work. He is giving young players the support he never had. The focus on mindful communication is deliberate. It addresses the exact gaps that existed throughout his career, where nobody asked how he was coping mentally, where nobody checked in when he was isolated at Arsenal, where nobody prepared him for the psychological devastation of retirement. But to understand why his pain cut so deep, we need to go back to where it all began. Quinn arrived at Arsenal from Ireland and exploded onto the scene. In December 1985, he scored on his debut against Liverpool, helping Arsenal win 2-0. Under new manager George Graham, Quinn became a regular in the 1986-87 season, making 35 league appearances. He was key to the team's success, and they won the 1987 League Cup at Wembley. It was George Graham's first trophy with Arsenal. At that moment, Quinn looked like a crucial part of Arsenal's future. The promise was real. The dream was alive. Young, talented, and scoring goals for one of England's biggest clubs, Quinn seemed destined for greatness. But then, everything changed. In 1987, Arsenal signed striker Alan Smith from Leicester City. Quinn later called Smith a massive obstacle and the finished article. The problem was not just that Smith was good, it was that Quinn's style, his physical presence as a tall target man, made Arsenal tactically predictable in the eyes of the manager. George Graham and his coaching staff believed Quinn's sheer presence on the pitch gave away their game plan. Suddenly, Quinn became invisible. He turned into a peripheral figure, making only 20 league appearances over the next 3 seasons. 3 entire seasons reduced to just 20 games. That is barely more than half a season's worth of football spread across 3 years. The worst moment came during Arsenal's greatest triumph. In the 1988-89 season, Arsenal won the league title in dramatic fashion. But Quinn only made 3 appearances that season. He did not play enough to qualify for a winner's medal. He was a ghost at his own club's celebration. While his teammates lifted the trophy and celebrated their achievement, Quinn stood on the sidelines, technically part of the squad, but effectively invisible. Then came the night that almost ended his career. At the formal awards ceremony, the club chairman, Peter Hill-Wood, walked up to Quinn's table. Instead of congratulating him, the chairman handed him a silver tray and asked, "What position did you play?" Quinn was so unknown at his own club that the chairman did not even know what he did. The humiliation was complete, and unlike his teammates who had earned appearance money and bonuses, Quinn could not afford a taxi home that night. He left the ceremony and took the N29 night bus. Sitting alone on that bus, watching London pass by through the window, Quinn almost quit Arsenal on the night bus home. As he later revealed, that journey became a symbol of his isolation. That bus ride represented everything wrong with his situation. Invisible, forgotten, and alone. Quinn began to feel like a hostage at Arsenal. The situation became unbearable, so he submitted a written transfer request at the start of the 1989-90 season. He admitted he very nearly quit the game altogether. His international manager, Jack Charlton, had warned him that he needed regular football to make the 1990 World Cup squad. The pressure was crushing. He was trapped between a club that did not want him and a national team that needed him playing regularly. Finally, in March 1990, Quinn escaped. He joined Manchester City for £800,000. Looking back, he said, "I was glad to get out of there, but the damage was done." This period taught Quinn that his identity and value could be erased overnight. It was the original trauma, the first death within his life. The psychological scars from Arsenal would never fully heal. They would shape every crisis that followed. At Manchester City, Quinn was reborn. He scored 22 goals in his first full season. He became a national hero for Ireland, scoring the crucial equaliser against the Netherlands in the 1990 World Cup. For a moment, everything seemed right again. The nightmare at Arsenal felt like a distant memory. Quinn had proven his doubters wrong. He was back where he belonged, on the pitch, scoring goals, making a difference. The crowds loved him. His teammates respected him. He mattered again. He had value again. He had an identity again. But success only raised the stakes for what came next, because this time, the crisis came from his own body. In November 1993, Quinn was playing against Sheffield Wednesday when disaster struck. He sustained a devastating cruciate ligament injury. The injury ended his season. He missed the majority of the 1993-94 campaign and made only 18 total appearances. But the real blow was the timing. The injury prevented him from playing in the 1994 FIFA World Cup. For a player in his prime, missing football's biggest stage was heartbreaking. His own words reveal the pain. "My first memory is being so gutted to miss out. But there was something even worse. Quinn believed he could have played. I had a cruciate injury, but I felt I would have been fit," he stated. The decision, however, was not his to make. In the end, Man City would not let me play. Once again, an external force, a club's authority, had stolen his power and robbed him of a career milestone. He was a hostage again. The powerlessness he felt was identical to his Arsenal years, except this time his own body had betrayed him first. The sense of control he thought he had rebuilt was revealed as an illusion. After 6 successful years at Manchester City, Quinn joined Sunderland in August 1996. He was 29 years old, and Sunderland paid a club record £1.3 million for him. But eyebrows were raised over the striker's injury record and age. The cynics, it turned out, were right at first. Almost immediately, Quinn suffered another knee injury. He spent most of his first season on Wearside injured. The club was relegated that season. Quinn had arrived as the record signing and supposed saviour, only to watch his body betray him again. The pattern of crisis and fragility continued. It seemed no matter where he went or how hard he tried, tragedy followed him like a shadow. Fast forward to 2004. Quinn retired from football, and the darkness closed in. It was a real bad year. It felt dark. It was tough getting out of bed sometimes. He called it a death within your life, that brutal shift from being a major star to Mr. Joe Public overnight. Quinn admitted he had not prepared properly for this transition. He needed a new identity, and fast. Without football, without the roar of the crowd, without the purpose that the game provided, Quinn found himself staring into a void. The structure that had defined his entire adult life was gone. The identity he had built was suddenly irrelevant. The adulation he had grown accustomed to vanished overnight. In 2006, Quinn led the Drummondville Consortium, a group of Irish businessmen, to buy Sunderland for £10 million. He became chairman and even briefly served as manager. He was no longer just a player, he was a saviour. This was his chance to rebuild his identity, to matter again. For a while, it worked. He was back in the spotlight, back making decisions, back feeling important. But this new identity soon created a controversy. By 2011, Quinn was deeply concerned about the extremely detrimental effect on our attendances caused by fans watching illegal 3 p.m. broadcasts in pubs. He made a public statement saying he despises fans who watch these illegal broadcasts rather than attending the stadium. He accused them of taking the easy option and damaging the progress of the club. The legend, built on fan love, was now fighting the fans. It was a controversy born from his fractured identity as both beloved former player and business-focused chairman. The man who once wore the shirt was now seen as just another businessman putting profits before passion. The disconnect between who he was and who he had become was widening. After leaving Sunderland in February 2012, Quinn tried to build an identity outside football. In 2011, he invested €700,000 in QSat, a satellite broadband company, and became its chairman. The business provided internet service to 3,000 homes in Ireland, but it shut down in 2017. This public and financial failure reinforced the tragedy. His attempts to find meaning outside football proved just as painful as his time on the Arsenal bench. The failure was public, documented, and humiliating in its own way. It was another rejection, another moment where his value was questioned, another reminder that success was not guaranteed. So here we are, the rejection at Arsenal, where a chairman did not even know what position he played. The devastating injury that cost him the 1994 World Cup. A dream stolen by circumstance and club policy. The pattern repeating at Sunderland, where his body failed him at the worst possible moment. The darkness of retirement, where he described feeling like something had died inside him. The controversy with fans, where the legend became the villain. The business failure, where even his ventures outside football collapsed. one tragedy after another, one identity crisis after another. Each time Quinn tried to rebuild, something knocked him back down. Each time he thought he had found stable ground, the earth shifted beneath his feet. The pattern was undeniable. The psychological weight was crushing. But at 59, Niall Quinn is not defined by depression. He is defined by his relationship with it. He has taken the pain of that N29 night bus ride, the gutted feeling of missing the World Cup, the darkness of his retirement void, and the controversy of his failures. And he has transformed them. His past is no longer his prison. It is his expertise. It is his qualification to help others. The very experiences that broke him have become the foundation of his purpose. His entire family is now focused on the problem that almost destroyed him. His wife's PhD research is literally about solving the identity crisis that footballers face. Her work examines the exact mechanisms that caused their marriage to struggle, the exact patterns that left Niall struggling to get out of bed. His entire job at Team Tarka is about giving young athletes the psychological tools and mindful communication he never had. From the chairman who did not know his position to the club that would not let him play in a World Cup, Quinn experienced powerlessness and invisibility over and over. He knows what it feels like to be forgotten, to be trapped, to be lost. He understands the weight of those feelings better than most people ever will. He has lived through the worst of what football can do to a person's mental health. Now, he is using that experience to light the way for others. He has not escaped the darkness by forgetting it. He has walked through it, understood it, studied it, and turned it into a mission. At 59, Niall Quinn's life is not sad. It is purposeful. His tragedy has been transformed into his life's work. And perhaps that is the most powerful ending to any story of struggle. Not that the pain disappeared, but that it found meaning. Not that the scars healed completely, but that they became a map for others to follow. Quinn did not let his tragedies define him. Instead, he used them to redefine his purpose. He turned his wound into his work, his trauma into his teaching, and his darkness into a light for the next generation of young athletes who will face their own struggles with identity and purpose. The man who once felt like a hostage has become a liberator for others, trapped in the same psychological prisons he endured. His story is proof that sometimes the greatest contribution you can make comes directly from your greatest pain, that your lowest moment can become the foundation for your highest purpose, that the struggles that nearly destroyed you can become the very thing that gives your life its deepest meaning. Niall Quinn is no longer living in tragedy. He is living with purpose born from that tragedy. Every podcast he records through Team Tarka, every conversation about mindful communication with young players, every moment spent helping the next generation navigate the mental challenges of sport is a direct result of the pain he endured. The night bus ride that nearly ended his career has become the origin story of his mission. The injury that kept him from the World Cup taught him about powerlessness. And now, he helps young athletes find their power. The darkness after retirement showed him the void, and now he helps others prepare for that transition before it becomes a crisis. His wife's research is not just academic work, it is their shared mission to prevent other families from experiencing what they went through.
Jack and Bobby Charlton are an indispensable part of England's 1966 World Cup legend. Despite their shared roots and mutual passion for the game, the nation's most famous sporting brothers were destined to grow apart. Few would have predicted how far.
The split screen tells the whole story. On one side, Jack Charlton in a hospital bed, and on the other, his funeral, a devastating end for a man who gave everything to the beautiful game. Big Jack, the indestructible defender who won the World Cup for England and became a national hero in Ireland, spent his final years unable to remember the very moments that made him a legend. The cruel irony is almost too much to bear, but this is not just a story of loss. It is a story of courage, legacy, and how one man's suffering helped change football forever. Jack Charlton was not just any footballer, he was a titan. For 23 years at Leeds United, he made a club record 773 appearances. He was the kind of centre-half who seemed carved from stone, physically imposing and seemingly immune to pain. He was not about fancy footwork, he was a fortress. Then came 1966, the year that defined English football. Jack was part of the team that won the World Cup, standing shoulder to shoulder with his brother Bobby as England conquered the world. After his playing days, he became manager of the Republic of Ireland from 1986 to 1996, transforming a struggling team into a force that captured hearts across the nation. He fished the rivers of Mayo, drank Guinness with the fans, and stood on the touchline like a protective giant. The put 'em under pressure era was built entirely on his personality, resilient, direct, unshakable. If you want to see more stories like this and support the channel, hit the hype button right now and give this video some love. Your support means everything and helps us bring you more content like this. But even titans can fall. The first real warning came in August 2009. Jack was 74 years old and on a family holiday in Mascaret on the Costa Blanca in Spain. He had been complaining about problems with his vision. Then he collapsed. His son John later said Jack had suffered a turn and felt really unwell. The family rushed him to a private clinic in Benidorm. The immediate fear was a stroke, one of the most common catastrophic events for men his age. For 3 days, he stayed in hospital while Spanish doctors ran every test they could. MRI scans, CAT scans, the works. In the end, they put it down to extreme heat, travel fatigue, and high blood pressure. He was given medication to bring his blood pressure down and sent home. The family played it down publicly, protecting the image of the Iron Giant. But looking back, it was a sign. The man who had played through injuries for over 2 decades was now vulnerable. 3 years later, in March 2012, came the incident that truly shattered his independence. Jack was 76. He was at home in Northumberland, and the house had a staircase that his son John described as a bit tricky and awkward. Late one night, Jack fell. He was alone. Pat, his wife, was out. Unable to stand because of how badly he was hurt, the World Cup winner had to crawl across the floor to reach the phone and call for help. Imagine that moment, a man who had stood tall in front of 100,000 people at Wembley, now dragging himself along the ground just to summon help. He was taken to the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle, where doctors confirmed he had broken his hip. Hip fractures in older people are serious. They often mark the beginning of a steep decline. Jack had surgery and it went well, but the recovery forced him to stay still for weeks. For a man who had spent his life in motion, that stillness was a prison. Then came the aneurysm. A blood vessel in his body had ballooned dangerously and needed surgery to prevent it from bursting. The operation saved his life, but what followed took something else from him. As part of his recovery, Jack had to undergo memory tests to see if he was still fit to drive. He failed. His driving license was taken away. For most people, losing a license is an inconvenience. For Jack Charlton, it was devastating. Driving was his freedom. He would head out to remote fishing spots, shooting grounds, and visit friends across the north of England whenever he wanted. The car was his escape. Now he had to rely on Pat and his children to take him anywhere. He could no longer just decide to leave. He had to ask. He had to wait. That loss of independence is one of the hardest things for anyone to face, and for Jack, it marked the beginning of a new kind of battle. By 2017, people who knew Jack well started to notice something was wrong. Andy Townsend, a former Ireland captain who had played under him, attended a reunion at the K Club in County Kildare. He said, Jack was clearly struggling. The sharpness was gone. The man who could recall every detail of a match from 30 years ago was now lost in the fog. When filmmakers Gabriel Clarke and Pete Thomas approached the family to make a documentary, they quickly realised they could not do a normal interview. Jack could no longer hold a conversation about his career with any accuracy. His memory was slipping away, and with it, the stories that had made him who he was. The documentary, Finding Jack Charlton, captured the heartbreaking reality of his condition. One of the most painful moments was discovering that Jack could not remember winning the World Cup. He was one of only 11 men who started in the 1966 final against West Germany, the greatest achievement in English football history. Yet, when shown footage of the game or pictures of himself holding the trophy, his face was blank. Director Gabriel Clarke said Jack needed to be reminded about what he had achieved. There was old footage of a younger, sharper Jack giving an after-dinner speech, joking about a goal his brother Bobby scored in the 1966 tournament. Jack claimed he gave Bobby the assist, shouting about a 35-yard strike. The audience laughed. But in his final years, Jack was the one who did not remember. Ireland loved Jack Charlton. When he first arrived in Dublin in 1986, some fans were hostile. There was even a banner that read, "Go home, Union Jack." But he won them over completely, becoming a beloved figure who helped the nation believe in itself. Yet, when his wife Pat asked him during filming, "They think a lot of you in Ireland, do they not?" Jack just stared and said, "I have no idea." The entire emotional journey from outsider to St. Jack had been erased from his mind. But not everything was gone. The brain holds on to emotional memories longer than factual ones. This was shown beautifully in a moment involving Paul McGrath. McGrath had been one of Jack's players, a man of immense talent but fragile confidence. Jack had been like a father to him, protecting him during his struggles with alcohol. During the documentary, Jack was shown a video of McGrath on an iPad. His face lit up instantly. "Paul McGrath," he said with genuine warmth. McGrath later spoke about that moment, saying it broke his heart, but also showed that Jack understood he was loved. The facts were gone, but the feelings remained. Behind the scenes, the toll on the family was immense. Pat Charlton had been Jack's partner for over 60 years. In his final years, she became his anchor. The documentary shows her managing his confusion, guiding him through the house, giving him the constant reassurance he needed. She spoke openly about the shift, how the man who had conquered the world now needed constant care. It was relentless. Dementia does not just affect the patient, it affects everyone around them. The filmmakers also discovered something deeply moving during production. They found a stash of handwritten notes that Jack had made. These notes suggested he knew what was happening to him. He was writing things down, trying to hold on to thoughts before they disappeared. It shows a man fighting back, even as his mind betrayed him. The family was open during the making of the film, but they set clear boundaries. They did not want pity. They wanted the film to show Jack still living his life as best he could. Although the directors were invited to film the funeral, they chose not to use the footage. The final goodbye belonged to the family alone. In 2019, Jack faced another blow. He was diagnosed with lymphoma, a cancer of the blood. For someone already battling advanced dementia, this was unbearable. The cancer brought pain, exhaustion, and confusion, on top of everything else. On July 10th, 2020, Jack Charlton passed away at his home in Northumberland. He was 85 years old. His family was with him. The official cause of death was lymphoma and dementia. His death came during the global pandemic, so the large public gatherings that usually follow the death of such a legend were not possible. But the love poured out anyway. In Ireland, the response was extraordinary. Radio stations across the country coordinated to play Put 'Em Under Pressure at 12:30 on the day of his funeral. The song, an anthem of Italia 90, became a hymn of remembrance. In Ballina, County Mayo, where Jack had spent so many hours fishing, a massive mural was unveiled. Crowds gathered for a minute of silence, treating him as one of their own. Paul McGrath said Jack had become a father figure to him and to us all. The outpouring of emotion showed just how deeply Jack had touched Irish life. He was an Englishman who became more Irish than many who were born there. His legacy in Ireland went beyond football. He gave a nation confidence at a time when it needed it most. The late 1980s and early 1990s were transformative years for Irish identity, and Jack was at the heart of that transformation. He showed Ireland that they could compete on the world stage. He showed them they could win. More than that, he showed them they belonged. The scenes of Irish fans in Italia 90 singing and celebrating were as much about Jack's belief in them as their own talent. He built a team, but he also built a dream. But Jack's story does not end with his death. It connects to something much bigger and far more troubling. 5 members of the 1966 World Cup starting team have been diagnosed with or died from brain diseases. Jack Charlton had dementia and lymphoma and died in 2020. Nobby Stiles suffered from advanced dementia and died in 2020. Ray Wilson lived with Alzheimer's disease and died in 2018. Martin Peters had dementia and died in 2019. And in a twist that made the tragedy even more painful, Sir Bobby Charlton, Jack's own brother, was diagnosed with dementia. The news became public in November 2020, just months after Jack died. Jack and Bobby had a difficult relationship for much of their adult lives, marked by distance and tension, but in the end, they were united by the same cruel disease. The image of the two greatest English footballers of their generation, brothers, both losing their minds to the same condition, forced the country to face an uncomfortable truth. Football had likely cost them their memories. This cluster of cases could not be ignored. It led to serious scientific research. The field study, led by Dr. Willie Stewart at the University of Glasgow, analysed health records of over 7,600 former professional footballers. The results were shocking. Former players are 3.5 times more likely to die of brain diseases than the general public. The risk of Alzheimer's disease is 5 times higher. The risk of motor neurone disease is 4 times higher. The risk of Parkinson's disease is 2 times higher. The study also found that defenders, like Jack Charlton, had the highest risk. Goalkeepers had no higher risk than average. This pointed directly to one thing: heading the ball. The findings sent shockwaves through the football world. For decades, heading had been considered a fundamental skill, taught to children from their earliest days in the sport. Nobody questioned it. Nobody thought it could be dangerous. But the data was undeniable. The very act that made defenders like Jack so valuable, the ability to win headers and clear danger, was slowly destroying their brains. It was a betrayal by the sport they loved. The game that gave them everything was also taking everything away. The statistics were not just numbers. They represented real people, real families, and real suffering. For years, people assumed the problem was only the old heavy leather balls that got soaked with water. But Dr. Stewart explained that modern balls, while lighter, are kicked much harder and faster. The force of impact on the brain can be just as dangerous. It is basic physics. Force equals mass times acceleration. A light ball moving fast hits just as hard as a heavy ball moving slow. Jack Charlton's suffering was not in vain. By allowing his decline to be documented, and because his illness mirrored that of his teammates, awareness was raised. Football was forced to confront the damage it had been doing to its players for decades. New rules were introduced. Children are now limited in how much heading practice they can do. Clubs and federations have been pushed to take brain health seriously. Jack's story became a warning that could not be ignored, and that is his final legacy. He was a defender his whole life. On the pitch, he defended his goal. As a manager, he defended his players. And in his final years, through the visibility of his condition, he defended future generations. The cruel irony remains. The man who created unforgettable memories for England and Ireland lost his own, but the world will not forget what he gave: his courage, his passion, his unshakable spirit, and most importantly, the awareness his suffering brought to a sport that desperately needed to change. Jack Charlton may have forgotten who he was, but millions will never forget what he meant. If this story moved you, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below sharing your memories of Big Jack or your thoughts on how football is changing to protect its players. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.